There seems to be quite a lot wrong at West Ham at the moment, and what I want to do primarily in this video is discuss what Jacob Steinberg wrote about in his article yesterday, which I've had a little think about. I've sort of reread on a number of occasions, and it certainly hints and points at a stalemate within the transfer hierarchy at West Ham. This is nothing new. We've discussed this already, this transfer window. But I think with every day that gets closer towards the first game of the season, which is, well, it's pretty much in 2 weeks, isn't it? It becomes a lot more of a worry. There's something very wrong at West Ham now, and I think we're absolutely crying out for some really strong leadership, and that leadership has to come from David Sullivan. If he can't do it, if he's, for whatever reason, he's distracted at the moment, or he cannot get involved in this sort of thing, then Daniel Kretinsky or somebody else is going to have to come in and take over, because there's something fundamentally wrong. I've seen a lot of talk at the moment about a lack of signings, about a standoff between the new director of football and David Moyes. David Moyes' reluctance to take heed of the players that Tim Steidten's recommending, but we also have a problem where David Moyes has lost 2 of his coaches. That's been put to a back burner because the other story's more juicy, so I sort of get it, but David Moyes has not been able to replace either one of those coaches. So not only are we going into the season, well, without our captain, without our best player, and without a replacement for him, we're going into the season 2 coaches lighter than we were in the last campaign. And I think if there were rumours of another coach coming in, I think I'd be a little bit more easy about it. But look, there's a suggestion that people don't want to work with David Moyes. I think the longer it goes on, and I mean players and coaches, there's a suspicion that that is the case. We'll never know because we're not in the room, but evidence, circumstantial, anecdotal evidence starts to support that claim. But we've got a lot more than that with this Jacob Steinberg article, should I say. I think what you've got to do is, for us to even go any further with this video, you have to ask yourself, do you believe Jacob Steinberg? Do you believe that what he is saying is true? Now, I think first of all, I do. I believe this, so that's that from my point of view. But it's not just about me, it's whether you believe it or not. It's not just Jacob Steinberg that's saying it, by the way. This has come from a lot of different people and a lot of different sources, and they say there's no smoke without fire, and I think we're looking at a blazing inferno at the moment, which is also being supported, not just anecdotally, but it's being supported by the evidence of our own eyes, which are there's no players coming in. We are the only club in the Premier League, and to carry on making excuses for it, which you can do, it sort of defies, number one, the evidence, and number two, the stories that we're hearing. For you to think that everything's okay, you have to blank both those things out. It's fine that we haven't signed anybody. It's not easy to sign anybody, even though every other club seems to be able to do it. And you have to be able to blank out all the stories. If you do blank both of those things out, then you can maybe start to make excuses and mitigation for why West Ham have not dipped into the transfer market yet, but it becomes increasingly more difficult the closer we get towards the never mind the transfer deadline date, closer to the start of the season. The lineup for the start of the season ain't looking too pretty, let's put it that way. But go back to whether we believe the Jacob Steinberg interview. I think what I would say with this is, what possible reason would Steinberg have for lying about this? I don't think he has one. He's written this article in The Guardian. The Guardian do not buy and sell newspapers off the back of West Ham rumours. They really don't. They're an established newspaper. They probably have a very, very loyal readership. My point is, they don't suddenly start selling tens of thousands more newspapers because Jacob Steinberg wrote an article about West Ham. And if he did, this probably wouldn't be the story that did it. It would probably be a back page spread that said something like West Ham in talks to sign Neymar or something. If what you were going to do is make a clickbait article, this wouldn't be it. Unless you are involved in West Ham, unless you are a West Ham fan, this isn't even a particularly interesting story. There's a lot of people say West Ham are a laughing stock. I don't think anybody else is overly asked with West Ham. I don't think too many people really look at the intricacies. You might get the odd comment if you look on our videos that we do on Hammers Chat. You might get the odd one comment every 5 or 6 days from a non-West Ham fan who turns around and says, I don't know what's going on with you guys at the moment, but that's it. We are not, the whole of the Premier League and the whole of the football world are not laughing at West Ham. This is very much us being concerned in our own little pocket of existence. So what exactly has Jacob Steinberg said? I'm going to going to read to you now. Sorry, it's not Jack and Ori. It's never a particularly good video. I spend too much time reading, so I'm going to try and make it as short and concise as I want. Steinberg said the recruitment strategy at West Ham remains anything but smooth, even with Tim Steidten brought in as technical director earlier this month. A scattergun approach has slowed things down, and the German's appointment, far from ushering in a new era of collaboration, has confused matters. Quite clear what he's saying. It was hoped that him joining the club would make it a slicker operation. It's not. It's made it slower, and it's confused matters. People are unsure of the hierarchy, that nobody knows who's hiring, who's firing, and who's doing all the stuff in the middle. Goes on to say there's already talk of tension between Steidten and David Moyes, a manager who has always preferred to maintain control over signings. In that context, it's not a surprise to hear insiders describe the situation at West Ham as a mess. Right, let's just get to that before we read any more. Don't know how much you know about Jacob Steinberg, but Steinberg has really good contacts within the club. You can choose to believe that or not believe it. Well, not only do I believe it, I know it to be true. Steinberg is well briefed. Steinberg, sorry, I'm talking about a journalist called Steinberg while also talking about a director called Steidten. So Steinberg's writing about Steidten. Not made it easy for me here. I know for a fact that he has a direct line to the club. He really can. So when he says insiders, people in the club briefing him, where the situation at West Ham is a mess. Okay, fine. I'm going to just skip down because there's a load of stuff in the article about... I think this is more Steinberg's personal opinion. He's saying about criticism jarring, bearing in mind we won the Europa League. All that's just an opinion. I just want to get down to the other stuff. It says there's a reluctance to repeat last year's strategy of signing foreign players who will need to adjust to English football. Moyes wants a solidity at West Ham, wants to aim to replace Rice with two midfielders. They've had offers for Ward-Prowse, Gallagher, Scott McTominay. There's a desire for a British core. I mean, just so... Steinberg's very much saying that is the strategy at West Ham. Well, we all sort of know that to be the case and believe that to be the case. Even if you don't believe Steinberg saying it, we got the evidence of our own eyes. We certainly bid for Ward-Prowse, definitely bid for Conor Gallagher. Don't know if we bid for McTominay. The rumour said we might, but there was an interest there. But two of those three we definitely bid for. That's clear. We may have bid for the third one. This whole thing about players adjusting to English football, Moyes spent the early part of last season claiming that was the issue, but actually when you delve a little bit more into it, I don't think too many people settled in too quickly. I think Thilo Kehrer did, actually. I think Thilo Kehrer started at centre-back. I thought he played really well. He took a dip when he then went to right-back, but I thought out of them he started pretty well. I'll tell you who didn't start well at West Ham last season: Maxwell Cornet, Emerson, and may I say Flynn Downs, actually. But I think Flynn Downs you could make a little bit of an excuse because he didn't really get the opportunity to demonstrate what he could do until Europe. So I would argue that actually last season, the players that were recruited from England, he didn't start particularly well. I think it's a bit of a fallacy. I think it's a little bit of a false narrative there, if you like. It then goes on to talk about losing the leadership of Rice and Noble, the article about Mikel Antonio wanting to leave, Cresswell being likely to join Wolverhampton. It goes on to say the problem is that Steidten can be forgiven for wondering why he was hired. One of his picks is Youssouf Fofana from Monaco, 24-year-old France international, but Moyes is unsure. Fofana is likely to move elsewhere, and Steidten is said to be frustrated with this. Some wonder whether he will last, talking about Tim Steidten. Others suggest that Moyes, who has lost Mark Warburton and Paul Nevin from his backroom staff this summer, will go if West Ham start badly. Again, there's more opinion on it. Let's talk about Moyes, let's talk about Rob Newman. As I say, I'm not going to read it all. It goes on to say, the complication caused by hiring Steidten, that's the second time that phrase has been used pretty much in this. So when the transfer window was open, is best encapsulated by West Ham losing out to Newcastle and race to sign Harvey Barnes. There's more talk about that. So much for business being done quickly. Steinberg says, and I think at that point Steinberg is showing his own frustration. That's a West Ham fan talking rather than a journalist. So much for West Ham for business being done quickly. West Ham did well to get £100 million for Rice. Anyway, so he goes on to say Moyes' moves for Ajax's Alvarez and Fulham's João Palhinha have hit brick walls, and the loan deal of Dennis Zakaria has not progressed. As it stands, Moyes is going to the season with Connor Coventry, Flynn Downs, Souček and Paqueta to choose from in midfield. He's basically saying Moyes has bid for Harry Maguire, that Moyes needs victories. You get the general gist. It's a mess. People within the club perceive it to be a mess. Okay, if we accept all of that, where's the leadership in the club? Where is the leadership? Because this is exactly what it needs now. This is why David Sullivan needs to step up now and say, okay, I need to deal with this mess. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him. And I blame him for this. I absolutely do. I blame him for appointing a director of football without a clear vision in what to do with him. It's like David Sullivan's got half a vision for the club. He sort of knows what he should be doing but can't quite commit to it. It's a weaselly thing to do. I don't like it at all. I think it's a half-assed, half-hearted, non-committal attempt at trying to make the club, I guess, operate more in line with the modern model, if you like, to use that as an absolutely terrible term. But it's a half-assed, a half-baked attempt at it. If you're going to do it, do it. Or, and I know I've said this before, or back the manager. But this halfway house, because David Sullivan actually knows. David Sullivan knows that this strategy of trying to sign whatever, Palhinha, McTominay, Harry Maguire, and pay big money for them, Sullivan knows. Sullivan knows that he is probably wasting an opportunity to reinvest the Declan Rice money and reinvest it in a prudent way that's going to provide a return in the future. So he stops short, so he doesn't actually fully commit to what Moyes wants to do. And this halfway house, this sort of steering between a rock and a hard place that he's doing, is actually meaning we're signing no players because he's not fully committing to Tim Steidten and he's not fully committing to David Moyes. And by doing just enough to try and appease each one, we're getting nowhere. And that's why he's fully to blame. He's absolutely fully to blame. I would not like it, I have to say, I would not like it if he went with Moyes and he went and signed all those players. But I will tell you something right now. If what had happened was already this season, David Moyes had been backed by David Sullivan and we'd signed Harry Maguire and we'd signed McTominay and we'd signed James Ward-Prowse, we'd be going into the start of the season looking a lot better and a lot more likely to get wins than we are now. But he's not backed him, he's half-backed him. And the other thing, at the point where you get the director of football in, if Tim Steidten has turned around and said that this guy from Monaco, this Fofana, he's the one, he's the midfielder, he's going to be the one that makes the difference, go and get him. Go and back your director of football. But by half backing each person, you end up backing out and backing nobody. And it's a complete and utter failure. And he cannot. Honestly, he's like the three wise monkeys all rolled into one. He sees no evil, he hears no evil, and he speaks no evil. You don't hear from him, and he's doing nothing. He has absolutely paralysed the club, and that's what you're dealing with now. West Ham are completely paralysed by their inactivity, and it's really hard, because you'd have to go some to make a case. And listen, at some point between me uploading this video and I popped away for a couple of days, I thought I was going to miss out on a load of news. I've missed out on nothing. Nothing has happened at all. And so close to the start of the season, that's ridiculous. But you have to really go some to make a case that you're not concerned that actually everything will be fine. No signings. We've lost 2 coaches, not been able to replace them, despite somebody leaving Arsenal, who supposedly is David Moyes' mate. One of the best coaches in the country is available now. He's left Arsenal. He's worked with David Moyes. Why is he not at West Ham? He's gone nowhere. I don't get it. Unless somebody can tell me something. Maybe that's a piece of news I have missed while I've been away, that Steve Round's gone and signed for somebody else. Has he? I don't know. Find it very hard to understand how we can really look forward to the season with no new players, with a midfield. You know, he said that. He said that, didn't he? What did he say? You know, Connor Coventry and you know, nothing wrong with Connor Coventry. You know, good guy, West Ham boy from the academy. Flynn Downs wouldn't have a problem with Flynn Downs. But I mean, let's be fair, a central midfield of Flynn Downs and Thomas Souček will have anybody worried. You've got to really spin it, and you almost got to be, I think, lying to yourself a little bit to think that everything's going to be okay at the start of the season with a half It's not just. It's just as we talk about West Ham not having enough substitutes on the bench, enough players on the bench. We ain't got enough staff on the bench. It's an absolute mess. And I'll tell you what, it's a bad look. And what doesn't help is start seeing all these reports about players we're meant to be getting. So Carlos Borges, gorgeous Borges, right? We were meant to have. We agreed the fee. If all of this is true, we agreed the fee with Man City, £14 million plus the buyback clause or whatever it was. The fee was agreed 2 weeks ago. What is left is to seal the deal. The player indicated that he wanted to come, otherwise the fee wouldn't have been discussed and it wouldn't have been agreed. 2 weeks, and we still haven't signed this player. This is meant to be the easy one to do. This is the young up-and-coming star with 1 year left on his contract. Yet we still can't do it. And I cannot stress highly enough, I am very, very annoyed at the moment with the leadership of the club, a lack of leadership of the club. I cannot expect, we're in a situation that David Moyes does not have enough power to completely take charge. He's pretty much been rendered impotent. And you say the same with Tim Steidten. Steidten has not got the authority or the clout within the club to do anything. There's one man, as far as I know, unless I've got it completely wrong, and Kretinsky wields more power and influence and is more involved than I think, because my own opinion is that he doesn't really get involved in the day-to-day running of the club. I don't think he does. I think he's got so many other business interests. So if my hypothesis is true, that actually David Sullivan is basically the overlord at West Ham United, what's he doing? It is such weak and poor leadership. He needs to take control of the club. He needs to take control of the managerial situation. If he can't do it, he needs to get out, and he needs to get out now.